I'm here with one of Congress's most brilliant members, Thomas Massie of Kentucky. And Thomas, I know you don't like to talk about this too much, but where'd you go to school?
Yeah, a little trade school down the river from the art school in Massachusetts, MIT.
So what was it like when you were there on the Oversight Committee questioning John Kerry and he, instead of responding to specific scientific data points, said you were not a serious person, said that you lacked sort of an understanding of science and data. Did that strike you as a bit condescending coming from, a politician who essentially married wealthy in order to get a claim that like otherwise would never append a person like John Kerry?
You know what? I wasn't personally offended, but his opening statements, he said, when President Trump decides to listen to educated adults, then he might understand. And so that's when I looked into John Kerry's credentials and found out that he was indeed a scientist. He had a science degree. And so I asked him about it.
Isn't it true you have a science degree from Yale? What's that?
Bachelor of Arts degree.
Is it a political science degree?
Yes, political science.
So how do you get a Bachelor of Arts in a science?
Well, it's liberal arts education and degree. It's a bachelor.
Okay, so it's not really science. So I think it's somewhat appropriate that somebody with a pseudoscience degree is here pushing pseudoscience in front of our committee today.
I had an antibody test 18 months ago that came back positive with high levels of antibodies. And so I've been interested personally as to whether the vaccine improves on that immunity and how durable and long lasting is that immunity. And so when the vaccines were first approved, and then by the FDA, and then the CDC published a short little blurb, I noticed there was a typo in there. Of course, I characterized it as a typo. This is December of last year. We're a year later. And they said that the vaccine was 92% efficacious for those with evidence of prior infection. And whoa, that's a pretty tall claim. Let me go look at the data. And I looked at the data and it showed that it was minus 7% efficacious for those.
And where did you find that data?
From the FDA.
Not some private group, not some obscure website, but from the federal government's own collected data.
Yes, it's still there. The data's still there. You can go see. The remarkable thing is they really didn't have much data. There were 1,200 or 1,300 of the 30,000 who participated who had evidence of prior infection. And so they split almost evenly, showing that the vaccine really didn't have much of an effect at all for those people. And so I called up the CDC, the director here in Washington, D.C., and I said, I think I found a typo. I didn't say you all are lying SOBs. And she said, let me get our top scientists on the line with us. And she came on the line and she said, we're going to start calling you Eagle Eye Massie. We went over this study, and we just never found this mistake, but it's right here in the thing. And I'm like, oh, so you'll fix it, right? Oh, yeah, don't worry. So by the way, I recorded 6 phone calls with the CDC because I anticipated this might happen.
The point of that sentence was to suggest that you don't need to test your antibodies before you get vaccinated.
Right.
It doesn't
It's in the wash. Right.
Yeah, it's a wash.
Yeah.
So, but we did, the word was taken out and literally nobody had picked up on it, including us, when we read the version that was published. So
Hopefully I was somewhat helpful.
No, we really appreciate it. We know we can't be perfect. We know we're going to miss things. We're glad that this one, doesn't seem to be doing anyone any harm.
Right.
But we were very. It gave us a smile that you found it. It was very impressive.
Yeah, it's interesting how recordings can be an instant cure to selective amnesia in 100% of cases.
Right. Well, and so they said they would change it. And by the way, you got to remember the vaccines were just rolling out. This is December of last year, coming into January. They were in limited supply. And the reason this question was important was, who do we prioritize? Mm-hmm. In a period when the vaccines are limited, should we be giving them to 25-year-olds who've already had COVID and recovered, who work in the accounting department at a big hospital? Or should we be giving them to nursing home patients or 60-year-old retirees or whatever? And because in Kentucky, they were in short supply. And they a month later, the vaccines came out and they had refused to change it on their website. And I challenged them on it again. They changed it to something vague.
Well, Thomas, give me the motive. Explain to viewers why the federal government would purposefully maintain false information on their website that you have pointed out to them and which they have admitted is false.
In the beginning, I tried to impart the best motives possible to them. Maybe they thought that people would think they already had COVID and without getting a test.
But why wouldn't they just fix something that's wrong on their website that they acknowledged was wrong, found by Eagle Eye Massie?
Because their basic assumption is that Americans are stupid and that they are the science. And that there are such things as noble lies. And this is COVID, if it's anything, the government's response to COVID is a series of noble lies that have been reversed multiple times. So,
well, I think that's a very charitable
I'm trying to be charitable, but my charity ran out, and they have caused people to die early on when there were limited numbers of vaccines available, and now because they refuse to recognize natural immunity, they're putting people at risk who don't need to be put at risk, because any extra benefit that might come to somebody who's already been infected and recovered from the vaccine, in most cases, I believe, does not outweigh the risk that person faces.
Well, let's drill down into that. What is your best analysis just of the data when you look at the effect of natural infection immunity versus the immunities that append to a regimen of vaccine?
Well, you can go back and look at the original PFIZER data and the Moderna data, which is published, and then the Cleveland Clinic study, which has 50,000. I'm like, wow, do they even have 50,000 employees? How can this be true? And it's true. They have 50,000 employees in their network. And they showed that it was as durable or more durable. And then you've got like the whole nation of Israel, okay, as a study. And they've shown that it's more durable in Israel.
Is there a single study that you're aware of, that you've read and reviewed, that shows that vaccination provides longer lasting, stronger immunity than natural infection immunity?
No peer-reviewed studies. There are a couple of contrived studies the CDC has done. There's one that has 53 authors. Okay. It's like 6 or 8 pages long and it has 53 authors. Those are 53 people that want funding from the federal government who have volunteered the imprimatur of their degrees and their education and their background to put toward this another noble lie.
Do you believe that Big Pharma has corrupted the way we think about vaccines versus natural immunity?
Well, so I was the first to expose. By the way, this was when factcheck.org came after me. I was like, well, let's go find out who's funding the factcheck.org vaccine program. And there it is, Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. The Johnson in there is Johnson & Johnson. And so
we don't always recognize it when we just see one Johnson.
Right. So so I'm like, well, okay, just because the same person was involved, that doesn't. So I look, they've got $2 billion of Johnson & Johnson stock in the portfolio of this, institution. And they're the ones funding the fact check that's trying to fact check me. So there is a very specific example. You can go to the financial disclosures. You can look all this up. It's not a conspiracy. It's true.
You and I made a movie about corruption in this town and the way that political donations and kind of member management gets people to behave and vote different ways than they otherwise would. And frankly, that they promise their constituents. And that's a bipartisan critique you and I have of the institution. It's called The Swamp on HBO. Everybody should check it out. You get a free trial, not even have to pay. But Thomas, I wonder if that dynamic of money and swampy corruption doesn't just influence the elected leaders, but also influences a lot of these bureaucrats like Dr. Fauci, like people at NIH who want to leave government service and then go work for the pharmaceutical industry. And so now they're essentially carrying the water of Big Pharma. That's I don't want to put words in your mouth. That's my assessment of what's going on. But do you think that that's incorrect or too judgmental on my part?
Oh, no, there is. First of all, there's no natural immunity lobby here in Washington.
Well, that's the key, right?
If there were, we'd be recognizing natural immunity, but it doesn't exist. But one hire that's really paid off for Pfizer is to hire Scott Gottlieb, who's the former FDA director, as to be on their board. And guess what? They are the only one. Well, this is another thing that's not a conspiracy because you can go find it. It's on the CDC's website. But they're the only one who have full FDA approval. By the way, that vaccine is not available in the United States according to CDC's website.